experience. Welcome everyone, good morning to all and sundry in Southeast Asia. My name is Jeremy Craig. I work with called Testtakers Singapore. We do SAT preparation. And with me is James, intro.
My name is James Russell. I'm one of the college counselors at NIST International School. Thank you, parents and students who are joining us today. I'll look forward to our conversation about updates in regards to college admissions and talking about how that works and impacts testing. So really happy to be here today.
Okay, and we're just going to have a brief kind of free-form discussion about the news that came out overnight before we get into what we've prepared, which is a destination by destination sort of whirlwind tour of the universe of colleges and universities, policies, predictions, etc., with a little bit on what we think might happen moving forward into the next couple of admission cycles. The big news that James messaged me about late last night was that College Board, the owners of the SAT, announced that they'll be transitioning to a computer-based testing format globally starting in 2024, but of course us international people get to be the guinea pigs. So basically starting in spring, a year from now, March 2023, the SAT will be a computer-based product. What this means is that kids are still going to show up to a test center with their own devices, with their own laptops. Beforehand, they would have preloaded a application that will basically have the test in the computer, in the iPad. Then they will hook up to the internet in that test location. The test application in their computer will effectively nullify access to internet beyond accessing the College Board servers to get the test information. The kids sit the test on a computer in a proctored environment with people still wandering around making sure they're not on their iPhones. And then after that, the test will be concluded, and that's the way it's supposed to work. All kinds of technical hurdles still exist. The College Board did a lot of computer testing when the AT was administered online, although that was home-based computer-based testing, which is a slightly different animal. And anecdotally, cheating was rife, let's just put it that way, particularly students who are taking it at different times. A key difference is that the computer-based test is just a test you take on a computer. What the highlight is now is going to be a computer adaptive test. And what that means, if any of you have ever done like free rice, the harder the questions are, the more questions you get correct, the harder the questions will become. This is the way that the GMAT works, this is the way the GRE works. TOEFL, I'm not so sure. But basically, if you get a bunch of questions right, they're going to get progressively harder. And by doing that, the testing system is able to kind of suss out what level you're at. To get a feel for that, go to freerice.org or .com and just get like 4 or 5 questions right, and then you're getting really, really hard ones. And because of that functionality of the computer adaptive system, you can shorten the test and have fewer questions. So the big headline that they're going to be touting about is the test now is 3 hours and change. It's going to be only 2 hours long. So it's going to be a quick in and out, you're done. The other big changes they're talking about, math is going to be all calculator allowed, whereas right now about 1/3 of the math questions are no calculator allowed. I think they're realizing that most American kids are useless without a calculator. And there's going to be less wording in the math questions is what they're saying. Basically, people are getting confused by the long word problems, so they had to make it easier. That will probably mean that they'll do some more advanced concepts of testing. Otherwise, they're just making it too easy and everyone's going to get a 780. The scoring will remain the familiar format that we have now, or 400 up to 1600, half reading, writing, half math. The big difference in the reading, they haven't talked about grammar yet, but the big difference in the reading is it's going to be short passages, maybe just one paragraph, and then it asks you a question about that one paragraph, and then you move on to the next section. You can do that with computer adaptive. If you're doing computer adaptive, you can't do that with long passages with 10 questions about it. It just becomes technically too difficult. A major challenge of the present SAT is for kids to keep focused for 65 minutes and answer questions as they go for that long period. This obviates that requirement and will allow the TikTok generation to just focus for like 30 seconds on the next, on the next, on the next. According to my information, university textbooks haven't gotten any shorter, and the major works that people have to read haven't gotten any shorter either. So you still got to learn how to read long books, but the SAT is no longer apparently going to be testing that. There's going to be testing is, can you understand what's written in a tweet? Okay, that's me and my sort of hot take, sort of get off my lawn take to things, but that is going to be coming. Now, who does it impact? It really only affects kids who are presently in year 10 internationally or year 9 in the States. So if your kid's in junior, senior year, no change whatsoever, don't need to sweat it. If your kid's in sophomore year, just stay tuned. There's going to be all kinds of practice tests on Khan. People are going to be writing about this. We hadn't had anything else to write about except COVID for last year. So we're going to be talking about this a lot. If your kid's in earlier, then work hard in school, read more, play sports, come up with something that makes your life interesting. So that's my broad hot take on this. Now, again, people have been talking about the SAT going computer-based for almost as long as I've been doing SAT prep, which is almost 30 years. So this is long in coming. It's expected. There's all kinds of challenges in that if you are at, say, a big international school like NIST or like the American School or UWC in Singapore, you go there and you know the teacher and you take it in a room with other kids. What if you're a closed test center? What if you're an Anglo-Chinese junior college in Singapore with 700 kids in the same room on laptops taking a test? Well, how do you admin that? How do you make sure the Wi-Fi doesn't break down? There's all kinds of technical issues that may make schools even less willing to act as open test centers because of just it's another level of complication that they frankly don't want to live with. So there's all kinds of challenges afoot. And like in Malaysia, to see Patricia's on, in Malaysia, Inti College or down in Subang, they've got 500 kids taking the test. How do you administer that? How do you make sure kids aren't alt tabbing or hacking their way around or doing something like that? So as soon as you make something technical, there are hacks around it. It's be it cheating on the SAT or ACT or APs or getting tea times in Singapore. There's always a workaround. And College Board hasn't exactly covered itself with glory in their technical efforts in the past. We certainly hope it works out, but I think this was a attempt by the College Board to maintain relevance, to maintain hipness, to shorten the test and make it seem like it's less onerous. In the press release, they quoted some sweet young thing saying, now I don't need to bring a pencil or a calculator to the test. Well, sorry, you got to learn how to bring your pencil and calculator to school. If you can't do that, good luck at Economics 101 at any decent university. So that's my broad hot take on things. James, anything to add to my rant?
Yeah, I just in regards to the whole process of getting around the system and computer-based testing and all the technical challenges that those bring with them. I'm one of the invigilators for. I do the SAT testing and I do the Cambridge testing out of the UK, which is for the BMAT exams and the TSA for Oxford and Cambridge testing. So they've been doing this successfully. They've been able to manage it with the TSA and UK testing for the last 2 years going via computer. The kids bring in their own laptops, they download the software. The issue is an invigilation issue. Each year at NIST, we typically have 10 to 15 students. So we have 2 proctors that are there. But what do you do, with an SAT test when you've got 200 test takers that are there, and how do you ensure that these kids aren't getting around the software applications and everything like that? So I've seen an example of how it can work, but obviously there still has to be, I anticipate, if they are going to, which they intend to do for 2023, they're just going to have to really maintain the strict invigilation, like having the proctors, the same number of proctors and everything for the rooms, because as Jeremy was saying, a lot of these students are able to negotiate around these type of applications. But thus far, but this is a different situation too with the TSA and with Cambridge testing. It's a 2-part process for these students. They not only do the computer-based or the paper-based test, they also have to do an interview. So that's the next follow-up for that as well. So it's not just the SAT, a one and done kind of thing. This is a multi-tiered process with the UK. So maybe there's a way. I mean, we've seen it with Duolingo as well. That's one of those other TOEFL type of face recognition software. You know, we don't know exactly what kind of fail safes the College Board is going to put in place, but it's getting better to do. But obviously, each time they figure it out, there's someone out there who has figured out how to do it, to get around it, or to manipulate it in some way. So it's a wait and see thing. I think it's, as Jeremy said, it's been a 30-year discussion point, but it's probably gonna have it's not gonna be a soft landing, is all I got to say. The first time it's done, there's going to be we anticipate hiccups with the digital testing for sure.
Yeah, and James, just to add to that, obviously they're rolling out international first, so we get to be the guinea pigs to work out all the kinks, which I get, right. But they have been piloting this in the States a little bit, kind of on the slide. But a good question came in from our friend Allison saying, if the SAT becomes adaptive to the individual, how are kids taking a standardized test? What it basically, the best way to think about it is they're going to be coming up with, say, a basket, a silo of, say, 500 questions. And then which question you get next is predicated on what you did on the question before. It's like a choose your own adventure little the probability grid that works its way in the future. And every kid's going to get the same basket of variety of questions to work with. And the idea in the testing being that if you get enough kids taking it, then you can normalize the scores across a broader, a couple 100,000 kids, and then you can translate that into the scale score that we have now. James and I were talking this earlier. What happened with the GRE, which is a graduate record exam for getting into graduate school in China 15 years ago, they had the test like this, computer adaptive test. Kids were just memorizing all the questions in the question bank and then rocking up. And I've done this. I've taken the GRE and only answered the first 10 questions and made sure I get them right. And then you could walk away and get a near perfect score. Whether or not that would be the case exactly with the College Board one, we're not exactly sure yet. They've learned a lot since then. But in terms of the actual format, it's still going to be standardized. Everyone's going to be taking the same format. That would be the argument of standardization. But the tests, the questions that people are going to be getting are going to be a little bit different depending on which ones they got right or wrong. And there will be a degree of randomness as well. It used to be that the person sitting next to you in the gym might be taking a different SAT than you. They've moved away from that as the test has grown, but certainly the test is going to be standardized and that the format's going to be standardized, but and the scoring is going to be standardized, but the actual questions are going to be drawn from this big question bank that they're furiously coming up with questions right now and testing to see how hard or easy they are and where they're going to come. All right, so that's a long answer, but so maybe James, we can turn to the agenda now. Some more people are coming in from the Thailand side.
Yeah, perfect. So Jeremy, can we see the screen all right? We're good?
Yeah, we're all good. And just any questions along the way, just put in the Q&A. We'll either address them on the fly or at the end. We'll try to get through this pretty quickly, just in the interest of getting everything in there. And again, this will be available on YouTube in a few days on my your children, your kids. The best people to talk to those specifics is your guidance counselor at school. And if any questions about specific testing, feel free to reach out to me. So without further ado, this is our webinar on testing admissions. We haven't done this since August, so it's an update of what we did before. The one from August is still very relevant, but certainly we're not going to go into as much depth in certain areas as we did for that one, particularly with testing. So James, let's go on the next one here.
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, just one more, I guess.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So yeah, just
all right. So yeah, it's the whirlwind tour. It's whistle stop, if you would. Talking about the UK, Europe, Australia, US, Canada, Asia, other destinations. Who knows? I've talked a lot about SAT so far. I'm going to truncate that a little bit. We'll talk a bit about what test optional really means. That's a bit of a confusion for all concerned right now. And then some recommendations by high school year that are still going to be relevant, even though they're a little bit changed now. And then we'll just wrap it up at the end. Okay.
Perfect. And yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
No. And then for most of the location specific stuff, we'll be deferring to James's knowledge, and I'll be just chiming in occasionally with what I've read or heard.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, so the timing, last night we, for NIST parents that are joining us as well, last night we had a junior college night for year 12 parents, just getting them set up with questions. I thought it was a really successful, it ran over time, but parents had really good questions about college and, what's happening, where are our students at NIST International School going, what are the trends? This stuff changes all the time, in particular in the time of COVID, it's really thrown things into a major loop. So we tried to mix it up a little bit this time. And typically what we've done is talk about we're sort of moving away from COVID and we're moving into where are students realistically, where are families looking at now based on the current context of schools and test cancellations and trying to link those things together too. What does testing mean in relation to where you want to go to school? So I'm just going to move on to the first. Yeah, this is we understand that things are changing all the time, and that the policies are changing with universities consistently. So the thing is, as Jeremy said, your best source of information is going to be your college counselor to ask questions to, because we keep abreast of all the latest trends. We know where our students have gone in the past, and can update you accordingly. And but once again, this idea about listening to people who are not experts in the field, who are not communicating with universities, that tends to get the gossip happening, and it's a lot of the information that's shared is not factual. So your best source of information, parents, is your son or daughter's guidance or college counselor. So popular destination for NIST students is the UK, and I just want to point this out. I'm just reading through right now. The offers have come back from Cambridge. Oxford University released their decisions a couple weeks ago, but Cambridge is typically the last to do so of the elite UK schools. And I want to just, that first point there, with the deferment would happen during COVID from the class of 2021 and class of 2020. It's become very, very difficult, and I can't this in terms of getting into these institutions. It was hard in the past. It's doubly hard or triply hard now, and the reason being is that there just isn't enough space at these colleges, these individual colleges at Oxford and Cambridge that have spots for students. So some students, due to COVID, decided to take deferrals. Start their programs up to, some of them in some cases 2 to 3 years later, and Cambridge and Oxford have abided by these agreements, and understandably, they're great students. They want to maintain these spots, but what's happened is that even great students, I'm just reading through one of my letters here from a student at Cambridge, like they really wanted to take this student. They, went through the entire interview process, but unfortunately, there just isn't enough space at the college for the student to attend. So even the great students, the ones that in the past that would have been sure things for these schools, are just not able to get places. Even the popular brand name schools, what we're seeing from our students as well. Even schools like the Imperial, UCL, Warwick. Popular programs like the CompuSci, or if students are going into engineering, even if students have close to perfect scores, for schools like this, we're an IBDP school, so students with perfect scores, we're seeing turnarounds where students are rejected from these institutions. So this is just, the UK is becoming a more popular option as well. They're obviously, with the fears around COVID in the US, and other parental preference and international school preference. The UK has over 1 million international students that are attending school there, and that number continues to rise. So the brand name schools in the UK are filling up quickly, and it's getting tougher to get into those schools. The other thing is longer wait times for students to receive offers. So the brand name schools, the King's, the UCL, Imperial, they're not letting students. They're not releasing any decisions until March or April, which creates a level of anxiety amongst parents and students, and trying to shore things up, especially as an international student where you've got to go through the the visa process, etc. How does the UK relate to testing? Well, as I mentioned earlier, if you jumped in, the main test for Oxford, Cambridge, and UCL for computer science specialized programs are UK specific tests. But the SAT can also be used if you've got a rigorous curriculum, if you're doing A levels or you're doing IB or the full diploma or AP, a strong balance of APs. The SAT is not required for university entrance for the UK specifically, but it's something that students can put if they've taken it. It is something they should put on their application if they do well on it. So it does. If a student is a borderline computer science student, say with Imperial, and they've got a perfect SAT score, I mean that would go a long way with helping to bolster an application to the UK.
The only proviso, just jump in here, James, is if you are going to the American system school. So in Singapore, if you're at the American school doing American school and you want to apply to UK, then the UK schools still have an SAT requirement. And look on the school websites because they're fond of having a minimum SAT score to get in. And they view the SATs almost like an IB result, which is bonkers, but that's how it exists. So if you're at an American system school, of which there are fewer, and you're applying to UK universities, you probably need to take the SAT.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That's good information.
Or ACT.
Yeah. So Europe, what's happening with Europe and the context of our school? Well, the Netherlands, I've told parents this before. Before I used to work in an American school in Saudi Arabia, and before I came to NIST, I never had a single applicant to any of the Dutch schools, and this is 5 years ago. But there has been just a swath of NIST students who are applying to Netherlands, and for a good reason, because they do offer. It's a very specialized type of education in the Netherlands. They're 3-year degrees, and they are very hyper focused, like the UK. They tend to be more specialized. If you're going to study psychology, that's all you're going to do. If you're going to do economics, that's all you're going to do. The American and Canadian systems are more broad. They're 4-year programs where you get a bit of exploratory time. The US a bit more so. But the Netherlands, you need to know exactly what you want to do, and that's what you're going to be doing over the course of 3 years. It is a popular option. The Netherlands is an English-speaking country, and a big consideration for families and for students is costing. I mean, you can get a degree from the Netherlands, a 3-year reputed degree for under $10,000 US per year, right? Which is, compared to the US, you ain't going to get anything for even with scholarships and everything like that for under $30,000 would be a bargain, for a US for an international student applying to the US, even with mythical scholarship opportunities there. So from a financial point of view, the Netherlands makes sense for a lot of families. There's great travel opportunities in the Netherlands as well. It's well connected by train, by cheap flights within Europe. So, and the feedback from students that I've gotten is if you're a strong student, if you're a strong IBDP student, you're a motivated student, you're sort of more on the independent side, I think, that is okay with that you can manage your time well, that doesn't need to be reminded about homework assignments, it's proactive, you're going to do well in that. But one of the kickbacks of the Netherlands, if your son or daughter is not one of those students that you feel they need more of a residence or pastoral care system, then it might not be the right fit for them. So it's a popular option, but I would only recommend the Netherlands for students who are more on the academic side, more self-discipline, self-management, because they do not have the same type of residential sort of collaborative. There's some exceptions to that with the university colleges that do promote that more smaller community. But if you're going to the University of Amsterdam, it's likely that you've got to find your own apartment, you've got to do all the laundry, all that stuff. It's just not provided for you, those types of services. So it's a more independent student who would be happy in a place like that. Brexit in the UK, this has had huge impacts on our students from European passport holders and international students, because of the UK, as I said, is slowly. So at our school, for example, about 30% of our students go off to the US. We've got about 20% the UK, but the UK is rising for international students. But any student with a European passport is really turning away from the UK because of the high tuition fees. Anybody, if your son or daughter had a passport or has a passport from Portugal or from Italy, in the past, a year ago, they could have gone to the UK they could have, for a 3-year degree, they could have got that for under £8,000. The cost now for a Spanish or Italian or European passport holder is now £27,000. So families are just like, why we can't afford this as a family. The only exceptions to that, we do have families that, some companies are willing to furnish to pay for that university education, but for the majority of EU students, they're turning around. If they don't have a UK passport, they're looking at other countries in Europe, such as the Republic of Ireland, which offers tuition for a European passport holder for $2,000, €2,000 a year. And a great education in Ireland because it's English. That's the preferred destination now for European students because it's English speaking. They've got strong programs there. So NIST applications have certainly, particularly for European passport holders, has increased that way. Particularly noted for medical or medicine and dental programs there, but all programs really. In regards, how does Europe work with testing? Well, many of the Dutch schools have their own brand of testing. So, for example, if you applied to a psychology program, they might have a specific, it's not in all cases. When students apply, they are informed by the university that they'll have to write after they've applied and have received the feedback from the university, they're given a date where the Dutch university will perform they have their own assessment based on the subject that the student is applying for. That could be economics or psychology. So just bear that in mind. However, like I mentioned with the UK, if a student has a high SAT math score, the SAT is a universally accepted standardized test. So it still goes a long way in regards to applications for Europe. If students have a high score, they should definitely submit it. And in some cases, like Erasmus University, or their econometrics, if the student does not have a higher level math, if they do well on their SAT math section, that can be used as a supplement. So there is some benefit to having a strong SAT result that can always.
James, if I just pop up in here, I've heard anecdotally from some friends in Switzerland who do your job that a lot of English language universities in places like Italy and France and Spain require their own admissions test or the SAT. And apparently their own admissions tests are much more difficult than the SAT are on a apples to apples. So for example, if you want to go to Boccini in Milan or IE school in Spain, great business schools, you can take the SAT in lieu of their own practice test, which might their own admissions test. So there's still utility for that. And just strong SAT, we'll talk about that in a minute about what a strong SAT and weak SAT score.
It's a universally, I mean, it's the only, when you think about it, right, in terms of every university system around the world, everyone knows. In Australia, they know what the SAT is. In Europe, they know what it is. So you're competing against students from around the globe.
It's a standard candle. It's what it is. It's a standard candle to measure something. And that's one of its few good uses. And we'll talk much more about, well, I'll talk briefly about what all that means in just a little bit. Okay, let's move on to, where are we next?
Perfect. We are next on Australia.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, so Australia, in the past, it was a popular destination for NIST students. One of the things that's great about Australia is that it does have that built-in gap year in that students don't start. So they finish their DP program here at NIST, and then they've got 6 months to really prepare for university, to look at maybe doing some internships or some dive master, those kind of things. So it was a popular option. But what's noticeable here in Australia, it's a strong quality of education. However, over the last 2 years, because of COVID, I mean, I said I wasn't going to bring this up, but here we go. The big issue with COVID is that Australia closed its borders they've been closed for nearly 2 years, and it was so difficult, and it still is, to get in. They've just started this after December 2021. they've started to bring students in now, international students, but they won't really know until February 2022 what the actual, how many students are actually going to be coming, if it's going to be online. So it's a bit of a mess with this hybrid, who's in class, who's not. They're still trying to figure this out. And that other point there, the smaller universities have not been able to weather the storm. So many of the universities that had financial trouble before COVID can no longer sustain. So that's just in regards to Australia and updates there. For Australian students in the SAT, if you're doing, like I said, if you're a full IBDP student, you probably don't need to take the SAT. However, if you are doing a combination of AP classes or IB classes and are not doing, the most rigorous program at your school, you might need to take an option for you could be the SAT test or the Australian National. That's called the ATAR, the Australian National Test. So if you wanted to go into a 3-year course. However, Australia does have options for foundation programs as well. So you do the extra year and if you wanted to go to a program later on. So that's, but as was mentioned, the SAT is widely understood in Australia as a rigorous and standardized assessment. USA, wow, okay, so yeah, big topic here. So yeah, what we're seeing is during times of crisis or during times of uncertainty, people move towards certainty or levels of comfort. So what we're seeing is many of the brand name schools, the NYUs, BU, USC, there's just more applications to the familiar, right, for families and students, and consequently, because there's more applications, that just means that the admission rates are getting lower. So traditionally, where a student, in my experience, could get into a school 5 years ago with a score of 35 or 34, now they're looking at scores of 42, 41. So it's getting, even the schools that were sure things in the past are no longer the case with the well-known schools, the familiar, the comfortable schools where either perhaps parents have attended there or there's schools where their students' friends want to go to, right? Because they've heard of the name, and that's why it's so important. And for parents who are listening last night to the junior college night, it's got to be, students need to do the research on this and understand, okay, what that means about admit rates and scores required for entry. So the same thing, the more competitive the Ivies, like I mentioned earlier on with Cambridge and Oxbridge, the big brand name Ivy League schools have gotten ultra competitive. We've been fortunate; we've had great acceptances to many of these elite institutions, but it all comes down to institutional needs with these Ivy League schools. So it's not only about getting the perfect score in regards to your IB. It's also about what else do you do besides being a strong student at school? What are some other things? What differentiates you from the academic stuff that you do in class that makes you a strong applicant for our school? Are you an athlete? Could you contribute to our athletic program here? Are you doing some really innovative research with your extended essay, or are you doing something on the side to help your community become a better place? So these are kind of the questions for the Ivies in particular. That's the next level, and we're going to have a meeting with parents in April, with year 12 parents in particular, to go through what it takes, really bring some students on, some students who are at these Ivy League schools, and to talk about what it takes to get into these schools and what students need.
Even then, James, if I just pop in and you look at what it takes, even if you tick all the boxes, well, so do 50 other kids. So you're looking at admit rates that are under 5%. And then you look at, after they take care of their rich alums and all that, you're probably looking at admit rates 2 or 3% for international kids. So you really kind of have to have everything in the box, and then you got to roll 7 and get lucky. So certainly have a punt and apply to 1 or 2 Ivies, but definitely you have to widen your perspective of other schools out there that are wonderful. A rising tide lifts all the boats. So everyone who's not getting into Harvard is now getting into BU, and kids that aren't getting into BU are now getting into Northeastern. So all the schools in the top swath of American schools are getting appreciably better, but they're also getting harder to get into because of the speculative admissions and whatnot. So please look outside of certain athletic conferences, which is what the Ivy League is.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is about, this idea with the SATs as well, there's just, every year they're doubling the number of applicants. So it just, as was mentioned, it becomes very, very difficult. So just some notes about the US as well. This is the big one, right? The SAT, the waiving of the SAT, ACT requirement. So the only schools in the US that require any of these kind of external standardized tests are Florida and Georgia. The other thing too is, for the Ivies, as was mentioned, because they've waived the requirements, it's become a bit of a free for all as to because they don't. I mean, a place like Oxford doesn't tell you need to have exactly this number of points. You just have to be a strong student. They'll give you the mid-range maybe of SAT scores and approximately what your GPA transcript should fit. So students read that, parents read that, and then they apply, but they don't have that magical, that extra thing that the school's looking for. So consequently, we've been, those schools are getting, as Jeremy mentioned, harder and harder to get into. The thing is, you have to be, if you're going to submit an SAT or ACT score to these schools, it's got to be a strong score, because you don't want to. The worst thing you can possibly do as a student is to have a perfect score in your IB and then submit a test score that's like 1100 or something like that. That's just not a good indication of that. So it's better to not send your score in certain cases. But once again, your college counselor, your son or daughter's college counselor, is going to be the best source of info for that. The other thing yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, just comment on what you just said there, James. There's a high degree of, I've got data on this. There's a high degree of correlation between IB results and SAT results. If the kid scores over 40 on the IB, they're going to do very, very well in the SAT as well, with just a little bit of effort. And it isn't like if you score a 31 on the IB, then you're going to rock a 1580 on the SAT. It just doesn't work that way. There's a high degree of correlation between those two. And I'll get this a little bit on testing, but yeah, it's certainly, if you can submit, it makes it look good, go ahead and do it. If not, it shouldn't hurt you.
Yeah, so just in regards to that too, the correlation is, universities understand that too. That other point about, we're going to have a meeting with parents next week about testing and whether to take the TOEFL or IELTS or IELTS, not the IELTS, the IELTS, or the Duolingo if you're an international student. So one of the strategies, it's once again, if you've been at an international English-speaking high school for 4 years, doesn't matter what your passport is, typically students will waive your TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo score. However, if you do well on it, it's a standardized test, and it's just an extra piece of information that the university can use if you're vetting for competitive schools to put in there. So once again, this is a conversation that takes place for our Year 12 families that are listening, between the college counselor and the student and parents, to talk about whether the TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo is appropriate to do. And most students will do it over the summer of their junior year. So junior year, summer going into the start of year 13 or their senior year. The other thing too, colleges are still giving out credits for AP, IB, or A-level courses. So if a student's doing HL English, that in many cases, there's not a universal, there's no hard and fast rule on this. But if you're doing HL English, that or one of your HL courses, this can sometimes be used to give you a full college credit. So up to 3 seems to be the norm for many schools. So that means that actually students, if they go to the US or Canada, they could finish their courses in 3.5 years, or as opposed to the full 4 years. So there's a savings that's there, depending on how they come out on their final exams. So something to think about there. Canada, I want to get through this pretty quickly. I know we're sort of running a little over time here, but what we've seen is Canada just doesn't have the amount of work. I mean, in terms of applying to the US, it's a process that every student underestimates the amount of work that it takes to apply to the US. Not only do you have to construct a 600-word essay for all the schools that you're applying for the US, you have to write supplemental essays for these schools. Why do you want to go to Yale? Why do you want to go to Harvard? What makes you an applicant for the Wharton School of Business? These essays take an incredible amount of time. On an average amount of time for a US essay, they've estimated that it takes up to 18 hours to come up with a quality piece of writing for a 600-word essay. And then you've got to write 2 or 3 other supplements that each take about 18 hours as well to do a quality work with that. One of my students, I talked to her about this, and she said, I'm so glad I did my US college essays over the summer. It took me, I asked her, how long did it take you? And she said, it took me nearly, if all said and done, about 100 hours of work. And that's just, it's not possible. She was applying to 10 US universities, and it's just not possible to do a quality job if you're just starting this whole process at the start of year 13 or your senior year. It takes away from the work that you're going to do with your year 13 and school. So that's why a major reason, it's not only because of the work, but Canada is also becoming a popular. All you do is, in most cases for Canada, is the college counselor sends the grades to the school, as they send the transcripts and everything like that, and there's nothing more to it than that. It's not an endeavorous work process for students overall. However, because they've received more and more applications year by year, some of the more specialized programs have now started to step it up. So places like the University of Waterloo for their computer science programs, the Rotman School of Business for the University of Toronto have now really started to amp up the extra essays and everything for Canada. But generally speaking, for the less competitive programs in Canada, it doesn't have the same workload, not nearly close to what the US does. Canada's, I'm Canadian. This isn't a biased thing. It's a great option for international students in particular. It's because of the work opportunities that are there in Canada. Canada needs more people. The population is 33 million. It's a relatively small country, and we simply do not get enough immigrants to our country that can contribute to our economy. So for international students, what the universities offer is work placement programs for students, scholarships, and if it's a pretty straightforward process if you want your permanent residency and eventual Canadian citizenship there. In 6 years, so your 4 years of university, you're already qualifying for permanent residency there. And after university, the Canadian government will allow you to work for up to 2 years, but they will keep extending that as well. So if that's an option, I always last night during our junior night, I talked about university being a 10-year plan. So Canada might be a place if you're thinking about it. If it's a place you want to live and work, the opportunity is certainly there. Does Canada take the SATs? Yes, it does. Once again, I want to come back with that caveat. If you're a full IB student, or you, for example, are doing a strong AP curriculum, you probably don't need to take the SATs. However, if you're applying for one of those competitive programs, such as the computer science at Waterloo, which is, it's the second largest Google headquarters on the planet. And they work directly. The University of Waterloo works directly with Google. Yeah, you probably want something, that little extra thing on your application. So it could be a potential thing to take to heighten your application. And because it's a universal test, it'll be considered in as part of your application. But don't stress about it. As I said, if it's not something that, for example, you try out the SAT, you realize it's not your thing, don't worry about it either, because if you've got a strong IB score, then you're going to be admitted to one of the top schools, top programs in Canada. Asia. So Jeremy and I were talking about this one last night. It is becoming I'll talk a little bit about Thailand. Jeremy can attest to Singapore and some other regions, but what we're seeing is families want this idea of, during times of uncertainty, families want to stay closer. They want to stay in the region. And what we are seeing is, many families and students deciding to do that. We know the reputation of the universities in Singapore, that they rank highly in global rankings, and in Thailand as well, that they are starting to emerge as strong programs. We have with engineering programs and medical programs in particular. And also the benefit of many of these, particularly in Thailand, we have joint programs at Thai universities with prestigious institutions such as the University College of London, Nottingham University, Sheffield. So students do 3 years of study in Thailand, and then they go off and do, this is particularly for medical programs in Thailand, they'll do 3 years in Thailand, then they'll go off and do their final 3 years in the UK specifically. So the reasons why Asia is a popular option is once again the regional stability, not having the same sorts of issues in regards to, yes, COVID is here, but it's been better managed overall as a region. So and families, depending on work placement, wanting to be closer together and during these challenging times. SAT is really the gold standard for students that are considering Asia as a destination. All Thai universities either want the SAT or ACT for any of their programs. I don't know, in Singapore, is it the same, Jeremy, for that too, for SATs?
It really depends on what system you're coming from. The Singapore universities are world-class, and they're primarily set up to educate really smart Singaporean kids. So if you're coming from the Singapore system, or even a Singapore school doing the IB, SATs are generally not required. But if you're coming from an international school that's more international, say from your school, and applying to Singapore schools, they probably will require the SAT. They like to say they require the SAT because Harvard does. But now that Harvard doesn't, maybe they don't. So really the best thing to do would be to get a definitive response in email from the guidance counselor, from the advisor at the university, and go by that rather than even trusting anything on the school websites, because it tends to be a little bit outdated. I mean, there are 7 universities in Singapore that do all different little niches. They have, combos with MIT, some really lovely programs in there. I'm not going to address Yale and US. That's a whole different webinar. But in addition to that, there's all these international outpost universities, like up in Malaysia, you've got Nottingham doing just about everything. Here in Singapore, you've got INSEAD now doing an undergraduate business program, a BBA. That's a really great program. A lot of kids from there to take my program, and whose parents teach there. And just a number of options scattered around. Up further north, Japan and Taiwan have both realized that they have too many universities. And Japan in particular has been rolling out English language programs, much as Dutch universities are rolling out English language programs. So are schools in Japan. So there's all kinds of options there. And, if you go to school in Singapore, you do a year there, a year there. There are many more options than were even just 5 years ago. And hopefully post-COVID, the rise of branch campuses will increase. Right now, there's some in China, a fair amount in the UAE and Qatar, doing varying degrees of wellness. Texas A&M is going through some problems now, but NYU in UAE, James, right, UAE, is much easier to get into than NYU in New York. NYU also has a campus in Shanghai.
We've got some students from NIST that are at NYU Shanghai, and they've got the campus there, and there's Duke University that's there, and
Duke Gongshan, and then in Hong Kong, SCAD is at the South Carolina Art and Design School. It's an art school, very well regarded, and they have a lovely campus in Hong Kong, and they spend a lot of time recruiting, so they want students, and we're not going to get into the geopolitics of Hong Kong right now. And again, for all these schools, it's a bit of a hodgepodge. So check the school website, check the Twitter feed to see what exactly they're looking for. Certain schools like SCAD are open for outside students applying. Certain schools like National University of Singapore, they really can make it kind of hard unless you're coming from that Singapore little silo. But it's still certainly possible.
Okay, so let's continue to, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jeremy.
Okay, I'm just going to run through this very, very quickly. There's more detailed models of this on the YouTube channel that you can see later. SAT grew out of a test that was given to people who went in the Army. If you didn't do well, you're at the front of the boat. If you did well, you're someone's driver in England. It's now taken by about 2 million people per year. That's gone down with COVID. SAT took a bit of a hit, probably coming back, we'll see. It's the test optional situation was driven by the fact that people couldn't take the test. It wasn't driven by the fact that the test is inherently flawed. Of course it is. But people glommed onto that, and that became the whole test optional movement, such that we have now. Upcoming test dates is going to be March coming up, May, August, October, December. One thing I neglected to mention at the beginning is when the test goes digital a year from now, they're going to be increasing the number of test dates internationally, probably adding a June administration and a January administration, because that's what they have in the States. Details to come. Scores, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but scores have no set validity. TOEFL scores expire in 2 years. SAT scores are with you for life. Okay, on the next one, James. These are just median SAT scores pre-COVID at a variety of different schools. 1100, solid score that gets you in with a shout. Great schools like St. John's. If you want to do finance, you're probably better off going to St. John's than Duke or Dartmouth. Why? Because St. John's is in Greater New York. So always, SAT scores are a very rough metric, but you really want to find out the program you want, the location you want to be in, rather than where does some school occur in some silly ranking. 1300, rock solid. You have some great land-grant schools, UMass Amherst, lovely school, Connecticut, Georgia, UC Santa Barbara. You see the UCs also are a wide range. And then 1500 plus, you're looking at the real kind of like aspirational targets of your USCs, Michigan, Duke, Dartmouth, UC Berkeley, UCLA, et cetera. Our programs in general see an improvement of about 200 points. It really depends on your starting level, and I can give you a good estimate of where you can expect to go with some decent prep. Okay, next, James. Yeah, every school had to go test optional because you couldn't take the test. If you're in Dayton, Ohio, you couldn't take it. Schools can't require a test that people can't take. And this continued, people have always loved beating up on the SAT, and this continued on to this cycle that we're in now. It'll probably continue on for another couple cycles. Harvard has said that they are going to be test optional for 5 years, and Harvard will get more applications, and Harvard admit rates will go down, and it will go to the top of the rankings. That's the game that people play. University of California, I could talk about that for an hour. They are legally, so all the UCs are legally not allowed to look at SAT scores. They can't even see them. It was a legal battle driven by politicians, not educators. So other metrics will be very heavily weighted as a result. Your GPA, your IB result. That's always been the most important thing, and they're doubling down on that. But then, because everyone has an A average in America, they need other things to go. It's pick up the piccolo. Try doing modern dance. Anything else to set you apart a little bit. Because if you just have if you're a good student, you have a 41 IB, yeah, so what? So is everyone else. I mean, I know 30 of that kid who go to UWC alone. So other things to look at. Talk to your university advisor about other schools outside of the little silo. I know in Singapore, a lot of people are applying to American schools aspirationally. So they're having a punt at applying to, some Ivies, it's like Cal State, UCLA and Stanford. And then the meat and potatoes is UK and Australia. And that's perfectly valid as well. Just make sure that you have a good mix of schools so you don't end up completely without a school. There's always stuff we see on the counselor groups like, oh, I have a student who didn't get in anywhere. Where can he or she go now? Well, they didn't do their job, and the kid didn't do enough research and applying to schools that are reasonable. So talk to your university advisor, and importantly, university advisors, we're all friends with each other, so there's back channels. If your university advisor doesn't know much about the US, they know who to talk to get the information. There's kind of a dark web of us who lurk and answer questions. Okay, on the next, James. SAT policies, essays, done, gone. Subject tests, thank goodness, done. They overlap too much with the APs. They were losing money on. As I said, UC is test blind through 2025. Harvard, test optional. Registration for the test has gotten better in Singapore anyway. In Thailand, I think still pretty okay. Just, you need to register well in advance. Used to be kids from China would come down here to take the test. That's no longer happening. But universities in particular need students, and if you can't take the SAT or do poorly, go ahead and submit an application because you might do okay anyway. Many of these changes are still developing. Universities are kind of all side-eyeing and seeing what other universities are doing with their SAT policies. So we're really not going to have a full shakeout probably until after the submission cycle is over, so April, May, when universities sort of start setting the policy moving forward from there. ACT availability, ACT went digital a while ago, poorly, then COVID hit, and a little sucker punch. So ACT availability is a little bit spotty right now. If you can take the SAT at your school, take the SAT at your school. It's the known quantity, it's what you have. Okay, James, anything? Okay, usage of scores, there we go. Now, while schools have gone test optional. The early numbers are that kids that submit SAT scores have a better chance of getting in. Now, these numbers I throw up here are confirmed. These are from the last cycle. So you see the middle column is admit rates without scores and admit rates with scores. Now, obviously, this has to be taken with a major grain of salt because kids that submit SAT scores are going to do well in the SAT. And the kids that do well in the SAT are probably also going to be strong academically. That's what the SAT purports to reveal. So there's a strong selection bias in these numbers. But long story short, if you do well and you submit, empirically, your chances of getting in are a little bit better. Of course, if you say University of Virginia, they're going to say, oh, no, we take a holistic view. We don't blah, 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 blah. But empirically, the fact of the matter is if you do well and submit, your chance of getting in a little bit better. When to test? This is always the big question. A lot of people rush in and want to test too early. Certainly, the earliest that we would recommend anyone taking the test would be December of IB1 or 11th grade. And even then, a lot of kids, even kids in the cool kid advanced math section, might have not covered some of the math on the SAT because the order in what you cover things on the IB is different from the order in which you cover things in an American math curriculum. So a good sweet spot to take it would be March of 11th grade. And then you have in your back pocket, you can take it again in May, August. August is a good test date right before senior year starts. Doing prep for it, doing prep the summer before junior year isn't a bad idea, but you definitely want to clear the decks and not take the SAT in August of junior year because you want to be focused on getting off to a really strong start on the IB or 11th grade because those grades are more important than 20 points on the SAT. So the longer you wait, the more the scores float up anyway. SAT test reading, writing, math is what you do in school anyway, hopefully. So the longer you wait, the better your scores will get, but you don't want to wait too long. Everyone's a little different. Talk to your guidance counselor. You can take the test multiple times. Most universities will take the highest combination of scores, but don't fall into the trap of taking the test 6 or 7 times. That's crazy. That's crazy. And a lot of people take it in December, then take it again in March. You end up in the Sisyphean cycle of not really going up very much. Take it once, take a little bit of a break, re-engage, take it again later.
I got one question, Jeremy.
Sure.
Is there one month that's the hardest to write the SAT? Is there one that the test it tends to be the more difficult?
Okay, we get this a lot. SATs need to be standardized across different test administrations and against different geographies. If you take a test and it feels like it's really hard, then that test will be scored easier because they have to normalize that score across all the different test centers and all the different geographies. So there's no easier date to take the SAT or harder date to take the SAT. If that was the case, you would have lawsuits flying around quicker than you could drop a hat in New York City because people would sue College Board. People love suing College Board out of drop of a hat for stuff like this. So all the tests are standardized in that they get the results, a number of questions right and wrong across a couple, they say 50,000 students, and then they move the scoring table so it matches the same score distribution going back data-wise 30 years to what they had before. And if you score a 1480, then you score a 1490, you know what? That's the same score. It's a rough metric. So you're in a little chunk. Only schools outside of America would have a hard minimum. Just broadly speaking, again, test what you're learning in school. A lot of the math you might have not seen until you're well into 11th grade. You want to get a feel for it, you just take a practice test off the College Board website and see what math topics you haven't learned yet and learn them on Khan. That's simple. Talk to your guidance counselor. It always goes back to talk to your guidance counselor. There you go. Now, how to prep early, work hard in school. Okay. Most important thing also is reading stamina. I get on my high horse so much. The first section of the SAT is a 65-minute reading section. I read a lot. I read a couple hours a day minimum. I have a hard time reading for an hour straight without getting up and playing with my cat or doing something else. Just being able to sit down and read for that period. I see kids just like flake out halfway. It's good. Oh, yeah. And that's okay. Take a little break, do some mindfulness exercises, re-engage. But working your reading stamina is key, particularly in this TikTok world in which we live. So reading articles, National Geographic is great. Golf Economist is a higher level than SAT is going to be. Golf Digest, Volleyball Weekly, whatever. It doesn't matter. As long as there aren't too many pictures, just sitting down and reading something that is not on a damn phone screen. It's written word in paragraph form, couple 100-word articles, summarize the article afterwards, you do well on the SAT. And indeed, when you get to university, what do you have to do? You have to read things. You're gonna have to interpret them, and you have to describe what they're talking about. And that's what the test is doing. Ken Burns' history documentaries, one chunk of the SAT is American history oriented. So if you don't know anything about the Civil War, maybe do a little bit of a dip. English grammar is terrible. Your kid's grammar is appalling. Doing the English grammar course on Khan is a great idea. It's not SAT prep, it's just Khan Academy, English grammar, great program. Don't do a stack of practice tests in 9th grade. That's crazy. You're just gonna reinforce bad habits. It's like if you just never played tennis and hit a ball against a wall, you're gonna get better. But you're gonna reinforce all the bad habits. How do you get better to start? You contract a tennis coach and they tell you how to do it the right way. And that way you start doing it the right way from the start. I get a lot of kids coming to me after already taking the test 2 or 3 times and taking a stack of practice tests. Getting those kids to change the way they do things is harder than teaching them how to do it for the first time. Okay. How to prepare later, take a mock exam first. Don't go to a test prep center to do a mock exam. You don't have to. Okay, you can take them off the College Board website or Khan Academy. Choose your test, work back to 2 or 3 months and work from there. Things to look out for. More is not better. You don't want SAT prep getting in the way of an IB. 1 point on the IB makes a big difference. 20 points on the SAT is negligible. Doesn't really matter. Free diagnostics at certain test prep centers. A lot of people grade those very, very hard. And as a result, you rush into something that you might not need. Guaranteed improvements are useless. And importantly, you want teachers who kind of understand the broad process, not just teachers who are really, really good at math. Also, your university advisors at all the schools in Southeast Asia are wonderful. I don't know any independent admissions people in Singapore or elsewhere that I would really wholeheartedly recommend. A lot of them, to use an American expression, are shysters. So certainly avoid those 4 fee paying, we'll get you into this school. It's just false promises. And that's that for how to prep. I'm just looking at the questions for SAT. If we do 2 SATs and scores average. Yeah, if you do more than 1 SAT, what generally happens is you would submit the highest scores to the university, or some universities want to see everything, but they won't necessarily average them because they aren't. It's not like a cutoff. They're just looking at as something to look at in parallel with your academic performance that is certainly more important. Something that I call the Craig curve. You prepare, your score goes up, you tap out, you maximize your SAT score, then you're done with it. And the more prep you do, the better. It isn't like the more prep you do, the better you get. If that was the case, everyone in China would have a perfect SAT score and the test would mean nothing. So diminishing returns kick in very, very quickly with test prep. And it isn't necessarily more is better. It's one to just keep at it, get to your potential score.
Yeah, good advice there too. And for your 12 parents listening too, and students, this essay thing too, overworking your college essays, you reach a maximum at 18 hours. It's been shown that is the optimal amount of time that, that once you start overworking stuff and overthinking these essays, it does take a substantive amount of time, but there reaches that maximal time when it starts to become ineffectual. So something to note there as well. So.
Yeah, and also just back to that question about, should you do a limited number of SATs? You shouldn't take the SAT cold. A lot of people just say, I'm just going to take it to see how I go. If you want to take it, just sit down at the kitchen table and take a mock exam. Don't spend the $80 because that score is going to be hanging around your neck for the rest of your life. So you really want to really take it after you've done a little bit of prep, is what I say. And then taking the test 3 or 4 times, university is going to be like, why are you taking the test so many times? Why aren't you doing, basketball? Why aren't you doing other things with your Saturday mornings? So certainly, I say the sweet spot is 2 or 3 times max. Although I know people in the States take it many, many more times than that. But my philosophy is you want to prepare, you get a good result, maybe take it again later on, and then worry about all the other stuff that you can make a difference.
Yeah, I would same as Jeremy. I would max out at 3 would be sort of as a maximum. Once you start doing it beyond that, as Jeremy said, many of the schools will be able to see, that the student is just they're spending more time worrying about this test than they are about their other academics at school. Like it becomes just a Sisyphus, this cycle that is.
And if you're rocking the SAT and rocking your other academic subjects, then ask your guidance counselor, what else can I be doing? What massive online courses can I be doing? What outreach programs? What new activities? What leadership positions can I use to stand out from all the other kids in Asia who score really well in the SAT and get a 42 on the IB? You have to find ways to distance yourself and not just, I do, computer programming and I'm in the math club. Well, you got to find something else. You got to find out some other hook to work with. Okay. Testing update. AP exams are probably still going to be in person on paper, but they're starting to kind of hint that, oh, we might do them on a computer again, like they did last year. The dirty secret that everyone knows is that people took the APs at home last year. People cheated, and then they got to university. They didn't know what they're doing in the class, but everyone just kind of is grinning and bearing with it, hoping that things go back to normal. College Board don't want to go through that again, but College Board get a lot of money from the APs, so they got to administer them. If they were to refund everyone who's registered for the APs, that's a couple $100 million. They don't want to take that hit. IB exams, James, it's more on your side.
Yeah, it's likely. I'm putting this as it's almost certain that they're going to happen this year with our students. And for the last couple of years, there were no IB exams here in Thailand, but it's done on a country per country basis. That's the decision that the school typically makes. In around February, the IB will ask schools if they can safely host the IB exams. So as things stand now, our school would be affirmative in wanting to go through with these exams. So it's going to be, obviously, it's a country by country, city by city sort of decision on that. So, yeah, it's likely we're going to be live exams for our current cohort of year 13 students.
And the IB is reducing the curriculum of what's tested this year as well, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So based on lost time with instructional time and online learning that many of the students around the world, in particular, here too. So that is they have condensed it, and certain questions will be left off from the exams that were.
Well, which is interesting. That's something that the SAT, to my knowledge, has not done. They haven't changed the hardness of the test or the format or anything. And we're seeing tests anecdotally go down a little, scores go down a little bit as the missed learning opportunities in the last 18 months are being reflected, particularly on the math side of things, of kids just not, I'm having, I miss circles. I forget how to do that. So we're seeing a lot of problems with the fundamental math that we're spending a lot of time working on. And then GCSEs and A levels, like the IB, I guess, they're just grinning and hoping it's going to be in paper. And well, I didn't know that A levels had massive grade inflation last year, which they're trying to get away from now, right?
Right, and this goes back to how this is full circle to our presentation with places like Cambridge and Oxford. They had to accept these students that had potentially inflated grades, and then this backstop of admitting these students from the class of 2020 and 21, and then deferrals. So it's just been. This year has been the most difficult.
It's almost set up like a cascading tidal wave of overlapping sine curves of kids getting in, and they kind of had to let them in. It's like getting Springsteen tickets, on Broadway. You just can't get them because so many people are in there and going to get. This is going to take 3 or 4 admission cycles to work its way out.
They got great.
Again, the broad advice always is look at other schools. It's not IB and Oxford. There's so many great schools out there with great programs. You have to just be a little bit broader than we were even 18 months ago.
No, yeah, they have great students that they want to take, but they just don't have the space based on the promises of taking gap years or students deferring offers.
Yep. So for present juniors, so class of 2023, no change for you guys. It'll be optional for most schools. Don't stress. You want to figure out where you're at for the SAT, take a practice test. They're free. If you don't do well in the SAT, don't worry about it. And look at schools that are test optional, of which there are all of them. Grades are the most important thing. They always have been. They always will be. For sophomores, find areas that interest you. Don't do try to do 16 different activities. Do 1 or 2 that really are near and dear to your heart, and focus on those areas. Even if you aren't good at them. I played basketball for 4 years. Was I good? No, but I played for 4 years. Right? You don't have to be preternaturally kind of gifted to be involved in an activity. You guys should be taking the test at the earliest in December of this year. And then again, next year is going to be a digital test. So I just realized this, the current sophomores are going to have the choice between the paper-based test in December or the new digitized test in March. We'll be addressing that at future iterations of our webinars, I think, about what to do. My horse sense says, go with what you know. rather than try out the first guinea pig on the new one. So I would say my advice might change a little bit for current sophomores to take the old test while you still can, because we know more about that than we know about the new one. For younger kids, so ninth graders, now don't work, just work hard in school. Find passions, do things that interest you, learn another language, learn how to cook. Do other things that kind of just are outside the norm that help support you academically. Not playing Fortnite, please, but just do things that interest you and try to flesh out your application. A lot of us have just been stuck indoors for the last 18 months. So finding other things to write about in your student applications about not COVID. Everyone's going to be talking about that in your application essays. Doing something else, I think, would be a breath of fresh air to the poor people who have to read 30 of these a day. What do we do? SAT prep. That's basically it. It's been a hard slog, but that's what we do. We also do tutoring for the other tests, the SSAT, which is a garbage test. Don't gonna get into that here. We also do some work for ACT. We have some classes for grammar and reading fundamentals. We've been here doing this since 2001. We'll be for a little while yet. All of our teachers are graduates from American University, only work with people at the right time taking the right test. We turn a lot of business away. I just had a 10th grader. Nope, sorry, senior year, work on reading, and other things like that. So all of our programs are available on our website, and we'll be doing a program for NIST students in Thailand over your February break on the Zoom. I would love to come up there. Actually, looks like I might be able to, so we'll see. We'll see. Don't tempt me.
Okay. All right.
There is a VTL. There is a VTL, but my worry is if things change. So if I could get there, I'll go. But we'll see what happens. Just a couple weeks away. So this is a program there. We've been doing Zoom for a while. We're pretty good at it. We get good results. And there you go. See, it continues all the way up. There's a couple lessons right before the test date. You take the test on March 12th. You do well, and then hopefully you never worry about the test ever again.
Yeah, I like the timings too. It's not your whole day, so it's the morning.
It's just mornings. Just mornings. So, you do that, and then have a holiday. I remember spring break. I like to do things over spring break, not just sit around school all day. Okay, and just to conclude things, this Chinese aphorism I've been harping off about a year now. My Chinese is getting rusty. Anyway, it means to find your way across the river by feeling for stones. I've even stopped planning I used to plan my programs out 1 year. Now I just plan them out 4 or 5 months, because I can't tell you how many times I've had to change everything. So just kind of roll with the punches, try to adopt almost like a Taoist mentality. If you know anything about Taoism, I'm telling all my kids to read the Tao of Pooh just to get a feel for that, and just adapt to the situation, because we can't change anything. We're just being lofted around this crazy world right now, and we have to just adapt to things as best we can. As Bruce Lee said, be like water, just adapt to things. And talk to your school guidance counselor. I know a lot of you are really stressed out right now. I'm seeing a lot of not mental health issues, but a lot of kids are just really stressed out by things. Mindfulness training. We do this for all of the students in our programs in Singapore. We get mindfulness trainers to come in and help you deal with that stress. Now more than ever, doing something like that just to help you unwind a little bit is key. Kids now are under so much more stress than we were back in our day. I talk to my students now, they're just like, oh, I just worry about my GPA all the time. I never knew my GPA was in high school. I was playing sports and reading books and having a good time. I think the stress levels have gotten really overboard. So finding a release, be it running, sports, mindfulness training, rock climbing, you need something out there. Otherwise, things just come to a boil. But I'm not a mental health professional, far from it. So and as always, talk to your guidance counselor, and don't necessarily listen to what your mom heard from her friend in Dubai, or heard on a WhatsApp group from her friend in Shanghai. There's a lot of bad intel floating around. That was the case pre-COVID, and this has just made it into three-dimensional chess, is making it harder to understand what's going on.
All right. Jeremy just put a note up there. If you have any questions or would like to ask, just put it in the chat. We can answer it live if you have any concerns. But yeah, once again, Test Takers has been great for our students at NIST. They've had very successful results and great feedback, positive feedback from families and students, and it works really well, particularly with the break. And when you look at it from a costing perspective as well, we have a special rate for our students here. So we're going to offer it in February. Then we'll have another one. This is geared toward our year 12 families and students, right? So as Jeremy mentioned, the optimal times to take the SATs, if you need to, is going to be in March and May. And then if you need to, as a last, final one, heading into your 13 August as well. So we'll try to shore up something for just before the August SAT as well. But yeah, just if you have any questions, or all the details are here for you about the schedule and everything like that. That's posted on the Testtakers website. Or just reach out to myself, and I'll get you in touch with Jeremy to ask any further questions that you have. But yeah, really, thank you, everybody. Great attendees today. We've got Jeremy. Is there any other further questions that parents have here?
No. I think we hit all the ones that came in, and obviously, any other questions, you should know how to reach me. Just my email's all over my website, and you guys know how to reach James for any NIST specific questions. But yeah, it's just kind of just roll with things and see kind of what shakes out. Right now in the admissions world, everyone's kind of looking and seeing what the numbers are going to say about admit rates as they are coming out now. And in about what, James, like maybe March, April, we'll know a lot more as the data comes out, right?
Right. Yeah, we only have some schools have released their early decision, early action. Well, early decision, schools are still doing early action right now. So, but yeah, the ED, some of the schools like UPenn has released their ED results they do that shortly, right after they receive them. That's in late December. But many of the schools, not everybody, that's another thing too. There's this myth about this early decision rush, right? The early action, early decision. I'll tell you right now that many of my students who were admitted to IBs or great schools last year went through the regular decision pool. They just needed more time to focus on their applications, to focus on their grades, to focus on other things, to heighten their applications, a bit more reflective time instead of just doing what their friends were doing and applying early, but not doing a quality job with their applications. And part of our role, as guidance counselors, is to help students. We have this mantra: no bad essays, right? We do not want students to submit work that is not their best, not representing their best selves going forward. So it's better to, if you're unsure, you're still undecided, don't rush applications for the sake of rushing them, because they're wasted opportunities.
Okay, yeah, I think that summarizes everything as best we can. So this will be up on on my YouTube channel in a few days, and I'll send James a link, and you can link to it on your internal stuff at NIST. Any other questions, you can certainly reach out to your guidance counselors or James or myself. And I hope all of you have a great rest of the week and a great year of the Tiger ahead.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.